Welcome everyone. Welcome to this edition of Achievers Spotlight. As you know, Achievers Spotlight puts the spotlight on entrepreneurs who are on their way up and blazing a trail and inspiring other people who want to become entrepreneurs. So if you want to start up a startup, this is the place to be at. And in today's episode, I'd like you to meet up with Richa. Richa's started her own firm about 2 years ago. The name of the firm is very cute and very innovative. It's the Happy Turtle. And as you know, turtles signify sustainability, reducing the carbon footprint, making the environment, making the world more environment friendly. So I'll hand it over to Richa. Richa, why don't you start by telling us a little bit about yourself, your background, and what made you start this venture?
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Paramjeet. Firstly, thank you for saying startups on their way up. Happy to hear that. uh, I'll start, in fact, with the name of the company itself because the name itself tells the story. It's called the Happy Turtle because I believe turtles are happier without plastic, as you said, sustainability, sign of sustainability. The reason why the name came about that way is because of my own experiences. So I'm otherwise by qualifications and degree the very unique engineer MBA combination that we get in India. I did my MBA from XLRI and then I joined the well-known FMCG sector for about 6 years. But during this time, I also started scuba diving. So I'm a very avid traveler and swimmer, etc. Always been a water baby. So the confines of the swimming pool became too much. So I expanded my horizons towards the sea. And after around 5.5 odd years in P&G, I shifted to Unilever. But in between the switch, I got the time to dive a lot. And it led me to a point where after I joined Unilever, I was pretty much on the edge that do I want to do this or do I want to go diving or what? And it reached a point where I decided that it makes sense. I did some calculated risks is what I would like to call it. I don't know how well calculated it was, but took a calculated risk, took the step of quitting my job and booking a one-way ticket to Indonesia. Became a diving instructor, started teaching people how to dive, started teaching people, taking them underwater, showing them the beauty of the underwater world.
Wow.
And sadly, it also led to seeing a lot of the underwater plastic pollution. So Indonesia is the second most marine littered country in the world. The first one is not India, thankfully. It's China. But obviously being marine littered and having the second highest concentration of marine plastics means that you end up seeing plastic on every dive. And we used to clean up the beaches every week. We used to clean up whenever we're diving and we would find some plastic underwater. But it happens on one dive that I see a turtle swimming away from the reef. Usually they stay closer to the reef because that's where their food is, that's where they're safer from sharks and predators and stuff. But this fellow is happily swimming into the blue. And when we try to see where he's going, it looks like he's going towards a jellyfish. But then when we tried to look closer, it was actually a plastic bag, which was suspended in the water. So we have this metal stick with us when we're diving. It's called a tank banger. It's kind of like a teacher's stick, I would say. But we use it to bang the tank to make some noise, not banging students and all. But I used that stick to make some noise to distract the turtle, and we got that plastic bag away from him. But it led me to the point where you start thinking, right? Like that's one bag, one turtle, and one turtle in the 5 minutes that you're seeing it for and stuff. So that got me thinking on that's just that one turtle saved for that day. I don't even know what will happen to it tomorrow. And got me started thinking more and more on whether these cleanup activities even add up to the efforts that we want to add them up to. Cut to a few more months of diving and teaching diving. I shifted to Bali by this time. And I started finding a lot of product packaging of the brands I used to handle and I used to sell. So it became kind of like a dharm sankat moment because when you're in FMCG, when you're selling these products, you don't really think much about, who's going to use that product, who's going to throw the packaging and where are they going to throw it. But when you find it on your favorite diving spot, it's another story. It's literally a tunnel vision story that Baki Dive, I don't know what's happening, but I know that that product was there. And it reached a point where I decided that it's pretty much going to be up to people like me to actually take this message back to all the people who don't see this impact, because the percentage of people who even dive is very small, leave alone seeing this and noticing
Yeah.
this and so on and so
Yeah.
forth. So,
So moving from your engineering degree to doing an MBA, then working in the best MNCs like P&G, Unilever, and then suddenly deciding to follow your passion and dive deep down. So
yeah,
you literally dived into your passion. So,
pretty much.
what was that trigger that made you quit your job and get into diving full time?
It's very difficult. Like everybody asks me this question, but it's still very difficult for me to describe because where diving is something where if you wake me up in the middle of the night and tell me, Richa, pack your diving gear and we're going diving, I would be happy to do it. It's that one place where the moment I'm underwater, it's that feeling that, oh, now I'm home. Like this is where
Wow.
I belong, sort of a feeling. So it's very difficult to describe what hold diving has on a person. But if you talk to anybody who dives, there's this saying that the sea, once it casts its spell on you, it never lets you go.
Beautiful.
And it's absolutely true. So I actually, the 1 month of diving in between P&G and Unilever led me to that point where I used to keep thinking that, like I want to do another one, I want to do another dive and so on and so forth. And somebody during one of these trips just mentioned, why don't you do this for a living then? And I was like,
Wow. I
typical
love
Indian mindset
to,
where you're like,
yeah.
ये थोड़ी job होती है, job तो है. This is so I, dawdled with that idea for quite a few months, in fact. But it reached a point, and I did a couple of more courses after that, but it reached a point where it made sense. It made sense from all aspects that I really wanted to do it. And I did my financial calculations if I can live off my savings. I did a lot more savings, lived like a miser for the rest of the few months, and made it work. Yeah, the booking the one way till the time I didn't book the one way ticket, it was like I don't know if it's happening. But the moment I booked that one way ticket, I knew it was happening. So
Interesting.
then,
So
then that feeling was quite like.
how long did you earn a living as a diving instructor?
I taught diving for about a year, 1 year.
Wow.
So I pretty much lived as a hippie for about a year out of
Wow.
one backpack.
Wow.
And then finally got so sick of the amount of plastic that I put a full stop, not I won't say a full stop, a comma on the diving. Came back to India and decided it's time to make turtles happier. So that was pretty
Good.
much the objective. I came back with the idea that I want to reduce plastic consumption because I would also research at this time because thankfully with diving the thing is you can be physically exhausted, but your mind is still active to think about things and do stuff. And if you're sitting by the beach with a nice book in your hand, you can obviously sit and think about things like that.
Richa, you're going to make a lot of people out there very, very jealous.
I'm making myself jealous because right now I'm sitting in landlocked Delhi. So,
So
but yeah, it reached.
then you came back
Sorry.
to Delhi, right? From
Yeah,
Bali.
so I came back from Bali to Delhi. I just had clarity on the name of the company and that I want to reduce plastic consumption in a country at that time. This was back in September, October 2017. So
Okay.
it was a time, it was pretty much long before Modi or even the UN environment in India had started talking so much about plastic. And I realized that I've come back to a country that doesn't want to talk about plastic. And I want to tell them to change their habits to, completely stop using single use plastic and stop using as much plastic as they do right now. So it was a challenging start, but it was, I think, for me, I think there's no regrets because it was something that I really wanted to do. Because the one thing that I loved the most, diving, had become painful for me because I couldn't bear to dive every day and see these fish and turtles eating plastic every day.
Yeah.
So for me, it
So
was about
when
being
you
true to myself.
when you came back towards the end of 2017, what were your steps? What was your first major step and the second major step, and before you finally immersed yourself into this as a business?
So the good part about being a diving instructor is you get used to living without money. Garib wali life. So thankfully, that transition wasn't too much of a problem that I came back to India also and had to live like a garib person here as well. But definitely what started was a lot of research on this path because I didn't know where India stood on plastic consumption as a subject even. What were people doing? What was the landscape like? Were people working on alternatives? What kind of alternatives were they working on? So the first 2 or 3 months were spent a lot in terms of traveling, in terms of ideation, um, in terms of seeing whatever things like if somebody would recommend, oh, hey, Auroville does a lot of these things. I actually went to Auroville for a couple of weeks to see what all is happening. Are they doing something which can be, useful for even a middle class person, for example, not just the uber rich.
Right.
So did a lot of traveling again in India. Thankfully, lived out of my backpack for some more time. Got to dive a little bit more around India as well. But spoke to a lot of people, understood a lot, read up a lot. Predominantly researched on my own too much. I think too much. Self-proclaimed PhD on plastic after a few months, and realized that nobody in India, in fact, nobody in the world has actually thought about measuring how much plastic is being used at a particular place.
No.
It's about how much waste is being generated,
Yeah.
and it's about how much plastic gets produced.
Yeah, these are
But
more of macro figures on a national level
exactly,
kind of a thing.
exactly, and we don't even think about before generating that waste. There is a step of that waste being a useful material and coming into your house. So there are like a few steps before a product becomes wasteful, and
Yeah.
nobody was thinking about those steps.
Yeah.
So that's where the idea of the plastic footprint calculator came about. That we need to measure what we are using. Instead, if I want to change what we are using, we need to first measure how big is the Everest that you have to climb or the mountain
True.
that you have to climb.
True.
So nobody was measuring the mountain. People were just like, "Oh, this is how tired we got, or this is the waste we generated." But you generated that much waste because your consumption is like that.
Yeah.
So that's where the idea came about. Took a few months to build the calculator as well. It helped me with my PhD in plastics, I think. And finally, after about, I think, 5 to 6 months, we had the first version of the plastic footprint calculator on an Excel sheet.
Not
Not
bad.
even a software tool.
No, not
um,
bad at all, because considering that academic institutions take years to make this kind of document, you single-handedly have done it in a matter of 5-6 months. That's quite admirable.
there was no bureaucracy stopping me, I think.
Yeah,
Plus,
true.
it was pretty much this what I was doing. I wasn't working on anything else. I was living off my savings. So the 1 year as a diving instructor, I chose not to use my savings. So it taught me to live frugally, and then the frugal lifestyle has continued here. So it helped me a lot in terms of focusing all my energies on this. Had the blessing of being able to reach out to a lot of industry professionals. So, and thankfully people were responsive, because it was something that turned out was bugging a lot of people, but nobody was doing something about it. So that helped. We then came up with the business version of the tool. Took a few more months to fine tune and figure it out and stuff. And then finally getting it coded, getting it copyrighted, and so on and so forth. So that the entire process then took about a little over a year. So by December, I think by December 2018, we had the copyright certificate for the plastic footprint calculator for individuals.
Nice.
And by May 2019 for the businesses one.
Excellent.
So these two tools are now our copyrights.
So besides working on this calculator, what do you call this? Plastic use footprint calculator, or what
Plastic
is the term?
footprint. Right now, it's a very simple name: plastic footprint calculator.
Excellent.
So it calculates similar to carbon footprint that people can now understand. That is the amount of carbon dioxide that you're generating by your actions. This is a plastic footprint. So basically, it's how much plastic you are using.
So
So
besides
it
the
tells you what's your impact.
So besides the plastic footprint calculator, what else in this domain have you been working on as a part of building a business, or having a look at the plastic footprint from a 360-degree point of view?
So basically, along with the footprint calculator, what also came out was the lack of alternatives in India. At that time, there were very few people who were making even bamboo straws in India. Now, thankfully, they're quite widespread. Uh, Cut back to 2.5, 3 years, there weren't many people even making it. The ones who were making it were exporting it. So, figured out a way to make a few products out of bamboo. Thankfully, being in Indonesia, I had the, and being in a touristy island of Bali, it's good to see a lot of people from a lot of different places come up with unique ideas, talk about different unique ideas and stuff. And because there was so many months of me eating up people's heads on what we can do while in Bali, I had a few ideas on products as well. And then we started working on those products, found a few artisans, found places where bamboo was available. It took us about 8 or 9 months to launch our online store. And we started with, I think, 5 or 6 products.
Okay.
But we basically started with products that were made completely in India, that are 100% reusable. There was no single-use product. And that are supporting rural artisans. So for me, it was a bigger ask that, it should not be a system where then you start using machines, then your footprint, so carbon footprints are higher. So we're working with rural artisans. We're providing them a sustainable livelihood. They can work from their own homes.
Fantastic.
Sadly, in India, we don't have big machines for bamboo products. If we did, I'm sure our production would be much higher. But the good part, the silver lining and all of that is that the guy can sit at his home and make the straws and make the cutlery, etc.
Fantastic.
We started with very travel-oriented products.
How did you zero down onto bamboo products?
Onto bamboo.
Yeah.
Oh, that was quite interesting actually. So the same PhD for plastic, I would also keep looking at, okay, if I had to replace this, what would I replace it with? And it became a very simple checklist of, if I were to leave it in nature, because again, it became like a travel test sort of a thing. A traveler is likely to forget something somewhere. So I wanted to come up with products that if I were to leave them in nature, they're not going to kill a turtle or a cow or a bear or any other animal or a monkey for that matter. So then bamboo became a very natural choice for me because of bamboo straws, to be honest, and bamboo toothbrushes, which were already quite widespread globally by that time. But then I started thinking that if a straw is something that you can do with bamboo, what else can you make out of it? So then we started experimenting with more and more products. Then from bamboo, we also jumped to cotton, which was unbleached, unstarched. So not organic cotton because that uses a lot more water as well. But then same experiments where you then end up learning, talking to textiles people and stuff, understanding where, what footprints and all. But the same footprint concept is what we applied, that, okay, if I were to figure out the most sustainable way, the reason why we focus on reusables is exactly the same, that there's no resource that will grow again in the same amount of time that you use and throw a product. So no matter what you make a single-use product out of, it is still a single-use product. So even if you make it out of the quickest growing resource, let's say you make it out of seaweed or you make it out of bamboo, if it's single-use, it's still going to weigh out on nature somewhere or the other. So that's why we stuck to reusable products. Launched with the first version of the cutlery, which now if I show you, you'll be very shocked on the first version and the current version.
Wow.
The first version spoon could not hold dal. Let me put it that way.
It was a beginning.
But it was a start, yeah. It could hold ice cream, but it could not hold dal. Now the version that we have, you can even drink soup in it. So
nice.
We've basically revamped the versions and stuff. Products continues to be our main focus and our main bread and butter because obviously something tangible, something that you see. And we've reached a point where we've formulated the treatment of that bamboo to a level that it's all natural.
Wow.
So there's no chemicals, there's no harmful ingredient, in fact, in the entire bamboo manufacturing. My packaging is completely plastic free. Our entire supply chain, in fact, is plastic free.
Wow.
The only plastic in our entire supply chain is the bristles of the toothbrush. Which till the time scientists come up with a viable option. I'm sorry.
Yeah, brushing with bamboo bristles will be a little harsh.
It's a little, yeah. I mean, neem datun is an option. I'm happy if people switch to neem datun, but until everybody switches to neem datun, we're stuck with bamboo toothbrushes and PBT and nylon bristles for them.
Okay.
So that's where we stand. And the third thing that we also do a lot of is awareness workshops, because
Okay.
the information asymmetry on plastic pollution is quite high, firstly, and the asymmetry on solutions is even higher.
Okay.
So if I ask you as well, is plastic good or bad? What's going to be your response?
I'm somewhere in the middle, I think.
Right?
It's
Like
it's
you're
good
not sure.
and bad. It's good
Exactly. So
and bad.
you're
Yeah.
like, there are places where plastic is needed, and
Yeah.
absolutely
Yeah.
things like
Yeah.
automobile industry plastics are needed
Yeah.
because they
Yeah.
drive fuel efficiencies
Yeah.
and stuff. But in 80% of the scenarios where we are currently using too much of plastic off, we don't need plastic. And it's only causing problems because our waste management systems are broken. So
But
people don't
Richa,
understand exactly where the problem is.
sorry, Richa,
So if
you just given a fantastic idea about use of bamboo. How about use of bamboo in automobiles? It's going to be fantastic.
oh, you'll be surprised. There are people experimenting with it.
Wow.
Yeah, so people have come up with bamboo bicycles already. Somebody is experimenting with a motorcycle, some structure, some parts of it being made with bamboo. So
Wow.
people are trying it out.
Wow.
So
Sorry, I
there you
interrupted
go.
you.
No, so I was just saying that we do workshops and stuff to minimize this information asymmetry. And the workshops are all focused on solutions. And they're
Okay.
focused on solutions that people like you and I can do. Like, we
Okay.
don't need to wait for the government to change. We don't need to wait for the laws to change. It's basically things that we can change at our end in terms of our consumption. Things that are in our, like circle of control. We're not even going to influence or concern circles and stuff. What is in our control? How do we change it? And how does that add up to an impact? Because the very first thing that comes to our mind is ek ke karne se kya hoga?
Hmm. True.
But
True.
like, what difference will one straw make if all 7.7 billion people on the planet say it? Then yes, it will not make a difference. But
No,
if
that's true.
every
That's
person says that it will, yes, it's going to make a difference. So
so.
I'm of the other mindset.
So now you're planning to make this thought that you had while diving into a mass movement. That I think will require a lot of manpower help along with you. I think you may need to increase your team size, and you'll
Yeah.
need to propagate this idea to a lot of organizations as well as individuals as well. So while you build your team, my question to you is: suppose somebody is having this latent passion of getting into this space, who are
Yeah.
passionate about removing plastic from their lives, who are passionate
Yeah.
about greening the environment. Is there any way in which they can get in touch with you and maybe join hands with you?
Yeah, so quite a few ways actually. We keep receiving requests like this, which is it's very heartwarming, and two, it's good to see that more and more people want to join, the movement against plastic. There are quite a few ways in which we collaborate with people. So if it's individuals, we actually start, and if it's college students, for instance, we are starting with a campus ambassador program where we train them on using the plastic footprint calculator for businesses for their own campus. So they become like like a brand ambassador sort of a thing, and they can lead their campus into reducing the campus's plastic footprint. In that process, what also happens is they understand how they can provide consulting to somebody. They understand how to find solutions that make sense for their client, which in this case is their college, and we handhold them through it all. So and for me, it's like this for us is not a monetary objective. For us, it's more of an objective where the message is being spread, and it's way more important for me to get that plastic reduced, to be very honest. So the campus ambassador program is one such way for students. We get a lot of requests from people who are already working and they want to do something about it as individuals.
Okay.
So for individuals, the way we recommend it is that they start with the plastic footprint calculator for individuals, which is on the website. It's a free tool. It takes like 5 minutes of your time to calculate how much plastic you yourself are using. And then we ask them to reduce their own plastic first, because it gives you a very, very good understanding of, what challenges are going to come up. How does it impact cost? You'll be surprised. You actually end up saving money by using lesser plastic than spending more money, because people end up thinking eco-friendly hai to mehenga hoga. or I'll have to spend
True.
more money if I have to become eco-friendly or more sustainable.
True.
Not true. Take it from a Garib entrepreneur who lives sustainably, that you save money, and you save a lot of money if you make sustainable choices. So they learn on their own. If they want to join us, a lot of people come and tell us that they want to start distributing our products, or they want to, different people have different ways of wanting to go about it. The good part is that the company is spread with our only objective is again the same, reducing plastic consumption, and we're pretty much doing everything under the sun. If somebody wants to sell products, we've got products for people to sell. If somebody wants to conduct workshops, we actually call them for the workshops that we conduct. We ask them to see how the workshops are being conducted and stuff, and then we actually give them material to use, and we give them
Nice.
our own footprint calculator to use, and they can then conduct their own workshops.
Nice.
So which basically, because the way they can spread their message to people that they know is going to be way more effective than me telling them, okay, organize a workshop for me to come there and then do the workshop. Also logistically, it always works out more efficient and more sustainable if they travel a shorter distance versus I travel a longer distance. So we collaborate with people on workshops as well. Campus Ambassador Program is the first one that we're starting this year. So it will kick off. We wanted to kick it off in April, but because of the whole scenario, it will hopefully kick off sometime in October now, September, October.
Okay.
Where we're working with a few colleges right now. We're not working with a whole big range because I'm pretty sure we'll also have our own teething troubles. So we're working with about 5 or 6 colleges in Delhi, where we will be leading this with campus ambassadors and stuff. So if students are interested, we're more than happy to help them join.
And
So absolutely always are welcome.
And what about people who want to make a living out of this? Sorry, while I have some water.
No
What
problem.
about people who want to earn a living out of this?
So the good part about the eco-entrepreneur landscape in India right now is that it's not a very, the penetration of this category, so to say, in FMCG terms, is not very high. So people don't have a set benchmark on costing. People don't have a set benchmark on what is a quality product, what is not. It has to be explained to them. So anybody who's good at getting concepts through to people will have an easier way to access and to make money in this sort of a segment. The only thing that I would say is that it's a very fine line between becoming a for-profit only eco-entrepreneur, where we have a lot of such people in India who will sell, sustainable products at a very high pricing, and most of these products are not even made in India.
Right.
Now, by looking now it's reached a level, I'll look at a bamboo product and I can tell you that it's made in India or not made in India.
Wow.
So a lot of these bamboo products are not made in India. They're all made in China, in Vietnam, in Indonesia, and they're brought to India, which in itself is a very high carbon footprint. And it's a drain of resources. Like we're the second largest producer of bamboo in the world. And if we are importing bamboo products from outside, then shame on us, right? Yeah. So there's a lot of scope in terms of product development in India. There's a lot of scope in terms of getting the products right down deeper and deeper in terms of tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 cities, because these products are affordable. And we've in fact had better responses from tier 2 and tier 3 cities than metro cities. People are still skeptic in metro cities. People are, not keen on changing their habits as easily. In a tier 2 city or a tier 3 city, people are way more receptive. If you tell them that, hey, this is harming you, and whether we talk about it harming their health or their environment, because thankfully they're still closer to nature than sadly a person living in Delhi is now.
But that's surprising, because the common thought process is that a person living in a metro will be more aware, he'll be more adaptable, he'll be more evolved to using a product which helps the environment. But this is a revelation.
Using a product, yes. To changing their habits, no. So you tell somebody in a metro city to buy a product which will make them look more evolved and woke, sure, a person might spend on it, right? But you ask them to extend it to changing their habits, and it's another battle altogether. Like if I ask people, the moment I ask people in metro cities to stop using garbage bags, I get I've even gotten an "it's impossible" statement. It's impossible. I'm like, a
Wow.
person is coming to your doorstep to pick up your trash. And instead of giving him two small baskets every day, two small bins to just upturn every day, you're basically saying it's not possible to give him two small bins versus giving him one big, large garbage bag. So, fun fact from the
Yeah.
plastic footprint calculator, every year we end up using 11.5 to 12 kilos of plastic in those garbage bags. So, just
Wow.
to discard your waste,
Wow.
you're using 12 more kilos of plastic
Wow.
just to discard your waste.
I'm sure that's something that many people would not have realized at all.
Nobody realizes it. That's the thing. And it's easy to change. It takes 1 week of a habit break to change.
Yeah.
And most of the times every time we've had this discussion anywhere, even in workshops, it's usually people who are in smaller places who are more receptive to it, that, oh yeah, we can try this out. And even simple things like, oh, it will save you money. Even if you're spending, let's say, $100 on
Yeah.
those garbage bags every month,
Yeah.
it's still $1,200 saved in a year. And it's
Fantastic.
not that inconvenient. So simple things like that. Asking habit changes from metro consumers is a little bit harder. Of course, if you tell them to buy a different product, the reason why things like bioplastics are spreading a lot in India, especially in metro cities, all those compostable and I
Yeah.
am not
Yeah.
plastic sort of bags and stuff,
Yeah.
they're spreading a lot more because of this issue, where people in metro will buy something, they will spend 2.5 times the amount that they were spending on a plastic bag to buy a bag that is claiming to not be plastic, but it's actually worse than plastic.
Wow.
So they're not going to double click it. They're not going to find out where the issue is.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, I can spend more money and be more green and look
Yeah.
more evolved.
More chic,
Done.
more with it kind of a thing.
Sadly.
So, Richa,
that's the
if
challenges.
some of our viewers want to pick up some of your products, is there any website or is there any place that they can pick it up from?
Yeah, www.thehappyturtle.in. Our footprint calculator is there. All our products are there. And in fact, we're available even on Amazon. We're available on around 12 marketplaces in India. And outside India, we're available on Etsy.
Excellent. So, guys out there, in case you're interested to pick up some bamboo products, which are going to be very, very innovative and they are going to be excellent for the environment, please feel free to click on the link below and go to the website or check out the products on Amazon.in and go ahead and pick up at least one product so that you can help out with the environment and do your bit for creating a greener place to live in. So, Richa, you're welcome. Richa, in the last stage of this session, is there any lessons that you've learned that you'd like to share with people who are planning to start their own business? One is, of course, have a passion and follow it.
Yeah, for sure. Like, don't let people tell you, really. But yeah, for sure. I think one of the biggest lessons that I've learned is ignoring naysayers, because it's very, very important. We tend to just say it in a breathing sort of a way, but if the moment you pay attention to naysayers, the amount that it drags you down is so difficult. And I've been a culprit of that as well, that I've listened to people who I think were my well-wishers, but they were actually just naysayers. They were like, oh, this will not work, or how are you going to do a business alone as a woman in India? And a lot of things like that, where I would initially peg it as concern or well-wishers who are worried about me, but at the end of the day, there would be naysayers who would be weighing down on my mind. And especially the sector that we work in, it's already depressing enough at times. We see a lot, like the amount of the plastic impact ends up impacting us a lot more, because I'm breathing it, living it day in, day out.
Yeah.
So
So
on top of that, if I let naysayers add on, it's just gonna kill me.
One is avoid the negative people like plague. Yeah?
Absolutely.
What else would you like to suggest?
The second thing I think I would like to say this for women entrepreneurs particularly, is whenever you meet any male client, counterpart, vendor, supplier, competitor, anybody, and a statement comes out of them along the lines of, अरे मैडम, और आपको तो बुटीक के लिए चाहिए होगा, और anything which kind of starts sounding like a doubt,
Yeah.
don't work with them. Because
Good
it's
idea.
only going to keep adding to issues with them.
Good idea.
And right now you'll be surprised that a lot of our our copper products, our cotton products, most of our products are the contract manufacturing locations, they're all handled by men.
Yeah.
And not a single one of these men who I work with right now have ever even had the inkling of thinking, oh, this lady can't do it. Or, like, madam to bolti hain, or stuff like that. Never. And we've had these suppliers with us now, thankfully, for over a year and a half. The youngest, the shortest duration is at least a year. So I've managed to switch suppliers if you have suppliers who are doubting you, switch suppliers who do the madam wala line sort of a thing and who don't take you seriously, because already as women entrepreneurs, we face a lot of challenges of being taken seriously in a professional landscape, which is sad, yes, but I don't mind that challenge. What I do mind is if I have a choice to not work with such a person and I don't take it. So if you have a choice, don't work with that person. You'll definitely end up finding a better counterpart, supplier, etc. to work with than working with a male counterpart supplier, etc., who stifles you. That's my advice to women.
Fantastic, fantastic. And any regrets that you've had so far? Any mistakes that you'd had you the chance to live it all over again? Any mistake that you'd like to avoid?
Mistakes, yes. I think as an entrepreneur, we all make mistakes, and we're usually on that edge that, oh, abhi gire, abhi nahi gire.
Yeah.
A few, like initially, I was quite like there's always issues of trusting the wrong kind of people, or there's issues where you learn with smaller setbacks, bigger setbacks, etc. Obviously faced issues where I ended up trusting people who I knew that, okay, I've known them for a long time, so they're okay. But when it came to business, it suddenly became a whole other story. So yeah, learn the lesson the hard way, that keep business and friendship completely separate, because you might be very good friends with a person, or you might have known a person for a very long time, but you might not know their business ethics.
Yes.
If you do know somebody's business ethics, for sure go for it. But I didn't in that case, and I had to learn the hard way. Almost lost some equity of my company in that case. Thankfully, didn't. And there's another one where I thought actually we can expand too fast. So I thought that there's a higher demand for the products outside India, and prematurely listed on Amazon US, etc. Suffered a few financial setbacks for that, which was a lesson learned the hard way. Because then I realized Americans don't really care if your product is unpolished and it is chemical free. Europeans probably do. So I ended up sinking some money there. But I think those are lessons all learned the hard way. So now our international expansion is slow. Like we take baby steps instead of going, oh yeah, let's go here.
I'm sure there's a lot of market within India itself that needs to be addressed, and you are going to soon go from the Garib entrepreneur that you have been to a very, very successful businesswoman in the next year or so. And I wish you all the best. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Paramveer. And I really hope your wishes and your blessings come true.